Councilman Billsbach and Claybaugh.
I think it'd be a good.
There is a copy of the Open Meetings Act posted in the meeting room and is accessible to members of the public. It's posted on the west wall. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests. The items are as follows. Item A, approve agenda as submitted. Item B, receive and place on file all notices pertaining to this meeting. Item C, receive and place on file all materials having any bearing on this meeting. Item D, approval of minutes of regular meeting on January 5th, 2015, as on file with the City Clerk's Office. Item E, approval of Treasurer's Report of Claims in the amount of $239,929.35. Item F, approval of Boswa Report of Claims in the amount of $32,442.92. Item G, refer claim of Husker Rehabilitation and Wellness Centers for damages sustained on July 23rd, 2014, allegedly as a result of a power outage to the city attorney and city's insurance carrier for review and disposition. And item H, resolution number 5722, executing the certificate of compliance to the Nebraska Department of Roads regarding roadway maintenance. Are there any items that the City Council would like removed from the consent agenda for further discussion? What about the public? Okay.
All right, Mayor, I move that all the items listed under the consent agenda be approved, accepted, and/or ratified as presented.
Second.
Been moved by Catlin, second by Party. Any further discussion? And your vote, please. And that is approved 5-0. I beg your pardon. 7-0. Thank you.
6-0.
6. Somebody's. Turn Rick's off.
There you
There
go.
we go.
That's more like it.
I spoke with Rick this morning. He said he'd be here.
He texted me. He's ill.
Oh, okay.
Okay. There are no public hearings or no bids. Next item on the agenda is a resolution entering into an agreement with Tarragon Consultants Incorporated for a hazardous materials assessment in relation to the Trails Extension Project South.
Mayor, I move that resolution number 5723 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Been moved and by Catlin, seconded by Kerr, that 5723 be passed and adopted. Your discussion.
This is part of the grant that we have to extend the trail from the recycling center out of town about 2 miles, and then also come back into town to about where Dempster's is at. As part of that grant process, we have to do an assessment of any hazardous materials that are in that area. We know that as we come back through the corridor in town, obviously pass through the old Hoover property and some of those, that there are some hazardous materials. We felt it was best to bring in an expert as Terracon to help us evaluate those issues. And so what you have before you tonight is an agreement with Terracon to do the hazardous materials assessment for an amount not to exceed $3,500.
Does that include if they have to do any kind of hole poking or anything? That'll be over and above that?
Those would be additional. It shouldn't be anything of that nature. Shouldn't not be any type of phase 2 studies. It's simply a matter of looking to see what might be in the area.
So there shouldn't be any core?
Shouldn't be any coring or
Okay.
anything that's there. No.
And it's only for about 1,500 feet, isn't it?
In town, yes. Out of town, obviously, is about 2 miles. So.
Okay. Any other comments? Anyone from the audience? And back to the council. Your vote, please. And that is approved 6-0. Next item on the agenda is a resolution approving a union contract with International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, local number 1536.
Mayor, I move that resolution number 5724 be passed and adopted.
Moved by Catlin, seconded by Morgan. that Resolution 5724 be passed and adopted. Your discussion?
Stan?
Yes. Ted?
So the 2% raise that's on top of, I guess this is for Tobias, that's on top of the COLA increase that they're getting?
No, that is the COLA increase that they're getting this year. So it's a
And was
total
that-
increase of 2%.
Was that part of the original contract? I mean, was that just, I know we discussed this at length, but at the last contract, was it in that contract that they had a COLA and that was the percentage?
Yes, the current contract that we're under was 0, 2, and 2, and this one calls for a 2% raise. We call it 2% raise, a 2% COLA. We use those kind of terms interchangeably, but it's a 2% increase in their wages.
Well, the reason I asked is that I was contacted by one person, so I had one person that asked me about it, and then I was confused by it, because I was after speaking with them, I was under the impression that they had gotten their COLA increase, their cost of living adjustment, and that this was on top of that to equal a little more than a 4% increase, because and I said, then I didn't know.
No.
I was just trying to get it clarified.
Nope, it's simply a 2% increase from their current wages today. Whether you want to call it a pay increase, a COLA, anything, it's 2% though, nothing more.
Retroactive to October 1st.
Correct.
Well, I'm reluctant to vote for this because I didn't vote for the other one, because I had kind of stood firm on what I said, but I have a real problem with the buyout on the sick leave. And I know we discussed this as well, but the more I thought about it, there were rules in place and they're really not followed. So I'm just really struggling with it. So, just the fairness of it. So,
Okay. Anybody, Rich?
On that sick leave, do we have any kind of thing in place now that there can't be extra overrun on sick time? You either lose it or you use it, or you lose it, or?
Yes, we have that in place for everything moving forward. These were the last ones that were left hanging for the IBEW and the NAPE contractual employees. These were the last ones that were out there.
Any other comments? What about from the audience? Anybody? If not, your vote, please. And that is approved 5-1 with Ted Fairbanks voting against. Resolution number 5724 has been adopted. Next item on the agenda is a resolution entering into a lease agreement with Carriage Motors for a portion of the right-of-way on Bell Street between 6th and 5th Street, and 5th Street between Bell Street and Market Street.
Mayor, I move that resolution number 5725 be passed and adopted.
Second.
Moved by Catlin, seconded by Kerr, that resolution 5725 be passed and adopted. Discussion?
On the northeast corner of 5th and Bell Street, there used to be 3 residential houses there. Carriage Motors has come in, purchased all 3 of those, torn them down to extend their parking lot or show area. As part of that, they would like to move the vehicles out, obviously as close to the street as possible. Part of that means it being on our right-of-way. And so what you have before you is having Carriage Motors come in and lease a portion of the right-of-way along 5th Street and along Bell Street in that area so they can park their vehicles on our right-of-way. If you'll see in the lease agreement, the amount of the lease is $100 per year. They have to come back and install a concrete sidewalk along 5th Street there between Bell and the alleyway as part of this agreement. Their parking lot will be made up of gravel or of rock. If they wish to pave it or make it asphalt, they have to come back and ask for permission, so if they make it permanent. This agreement also gives them permission to sell goods on city property since they would be on the right-of-way.
What's the back on the how far back do they have to stay from?
Setback?
From the sidewalk, yeah.
They'll be able to go right to the sidewalk.
Mr. Grip?
I'm Cook, that's Kurt.
I said, Mr. Cook?
Oh, I thought you said Kurt. I said, we don't look anything alike. But anyway, will the sidewalk be right up on this street curbside then, or will it?
No, the sidewalk will be 4 feet back from back of curb.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't right up on the curb. Thank you.
Yeah, we had the same conversation one time when Spady's wanted to do this, but although we weren't allowed, we couldn't allow them because of the state, because of the highway. I don't have a problem with it. The only thing that I would ask that after this, that we look at the amount that we're, and I don't have a problem with the amount. What I'm asking you is to look at the amount that there were for per foot for the same ratio that we have other leases with other people in the community, and so we're charging everybody the same thing, per foot.
Might be something for a work session.
Yeah, because it's kind of a hodgepodge now, so.
Any other discussion? Anyone from the audience? Back to the council. Your vote, please. And that is approved 6-0. Ordinance number 5725 has been adopted. I beg your pardon, resolution. Next item is a resolution entering into a proposal for architectural services for Michael Fakler for the Beatrice welcome signs.
Mayor, I move that resolution number 5726 be passed and adopted.
Seconded by, motion by Catlin, seconded by Morgan, that resolution number 5726 be passed and adopted. In discussion?
Part of our ongoing process of examining replacing our welcome signs, as you know, we entered an agreement with Carol Schuster. As part of that, what we need to do is bring on Michael Fakler as architect. He will help us design if you will, the base. How deep does it need to be into the ground? What kind of structural engineering do you need so that when you put up the metal silhouette, it doesn't blow over in the wind? Those types of things. And so that's what this contract would cover. You'll see that the amount is for $4,000.
And this is something that's carbon copied. For one sign, he does it for one, we can use the same thing for each one of the signs, correct?
If you end up having the same sign at all of them, yes, you'll be able to have the same.
That's just for the community's benefit, that it's not $4,000 per site, it's $4,000 for all of them.
Correct.
Okay.
However, that's if the signs are cookie cutter and remain the same. If they don't, there could be a difference.
I see that another clause in here says too, he retains the ownership of the designs. Won't that be a little bit difficult then if we decide 10 years down the road or something to add 2 more, or 20 more or something?
What you have to remember, what he's designing is the concrete base. That's what he's designing, is a rectangle box, if you will.
Like the same plans over the future, just in case either he's not here or we decide to.
I mean, we'll have a copy. We'll have a set.
We'll have,
Yeah. So I'm not concerned about that. We own the actual artwork that's being done. We own that. So I'm not concerned about the base part of it.
He's giving us the carbon copy.
Anybody else? Any comments, questions? Anybody from the audience regarding the welcome signs? All right, and your vote, please. And that is approved 6-0. Ordinance number, I keep saying ordinance, I'm sorry, resolution number 5726 has been passed and adopted. Next item on we have no ordinances, even though I've been saying that. Next item on the agenda is a public forum. The purpose of the public forum is the presentation of an item by the general public to the city council for consideration at a later date. No discussion or action will be taken by the city council at this time. First of all, any councilman have anything for the public forum? And anybody from the audience? Okay. Next item on the agenda, item number 7, is discussion on 407 Court, and we have a structural engineer's report from King Little, who was hired to do his examination of 407 Court Street, the building that the roof collapsed. Tobias and Mr. Burrows.
Sure. If you've seen in your packet the report from King Little, first off, we did look around for a structural engineer. King Little had done some work in Lincoln. and some other places with similar type buildings and conditions. And so his name was the name that kept popping up to us when we were looking for an expert. And so that's why we went with this gentleman. If you read through his report, he's done an analysis as far as what happened and kind of what needs to happen going forward. You'll note in his report that likely the reason that the roof at 407 Court Street collapsed was due to deterioration in wood rot of the wood framing and its attachments. That's kind of the reason that the roof did collapse on there. He did address so a few things that we need to do as far as the demolition goes. We need to look for a licensed professional demolition contractor with experience for these types of events. So yes, it will probably be a little more costly than some other demolitions we've had done. He does mention in here some areas that might need to be addressed and shored up on the adjoining buildings before demolition's taken place. Again, just to make sure everything is safe and secure. It talks about what to do with the area once you are done with it. Leaving as a grassy area doesn't seem to be an answer due to the hydraulic pressures that will result from basically rainwater falling on the open spot and then pushing against the basements that are next to it. So if you read through his report, his recommendation is either you pave the entire area or you pave out about 5 to 6 feet from each building and kind of keep the water away from there as best you can. So that's the report in a nutshell as far as what it says. Questions? James hopefully can answer some of the more technical questions, and we'll try to answer some questions about where we're at and where we're going.
Gentlemen?
The water, James. Okay, and as I read through it, I have no idea. Can you flip over to number 9 on the observations? I don't know what a pilaster is. The top middle.
The pilaster, yeah.
What is that?
Well, keep in mind, let's see, that's photo 18 and 19. I wrote some notes on here, so in all reality, too, I'll try to give you some updates to this. Keep in mind, we went through it and we found some items that we're gonna get corrected in terms of where he's referencing some photos from, but we didn't want to go back to the engineer. We're trying to try to keep this moving as fast as we can.
Yep.
But on those photos, 18 and 19, that is actually, and someone can correct me wrong, but that actually what they're talking about is just the area, and you see the white roof on photo 18. That's actually 411 Court Street.
So that's the knuckle?
Yeah, it's just the area where you see the brick kind of missing there. It's the pilaster there, yeah.
Okay. So now I know what that is. I know what he was talking about. The rest of it I kind of got. But I do have a question about the water. Okay,
Yep.
and I would lean towards paving all of it and not leaving anything gapped in the center. But this, and I haven't been in the site, but as you stand on the street, obviously it runs east to west. The street does, in the slope.
Yes.
So is it your intention or is their intention, and I didn't get it out of the report, but you're either going to have the water run towards the alley, which is my assumption,
Right.
or so that, because he suggested either pave it in a little bit north and south or pave it in a little bit east and west, but that doesn't, that lets the water go down the center. So my question is, we're going to own this, so do we have responsibility that we're forcing water onto a neighbor's property? Because it's going to go towards 405 Court. It's going to go towards their property.
The way you'd want to do that, your
Do you
assumptions
have to
are
take it all the
correct.
way to the alley?
You'd want to take everything to the center in something
Oh.
like that. You'd want to take it to the center of that property and then have it go back, whether to the street or to the alley. But in this case, I think the land falls better to the alleyway.
Okay.
So if you did something like that, yes, you'd want to pull the water from the two buildings to the center and then have it go back to the alley. So you wouldn't want to take like all the water from the east and have it set over against the curb on the west side. You'd want to try to pull it straight or keep it in the center as much as possible.
Okay. See, and I didn't get that it would move to the center. My concern was that everything would come down and come against the building on 405, and I didn't.
Right.
I guess I wasn't under the assumption. that it
But
would
you're under
go
the
to
correct
center.
assumption. It makes it tough when you do have fall like that from one side to the other. Making that fit in there and making it aesthetically pleasing at the same time and getting water to go where you want it to. It can be overcome, but I'm just saying it is something that you have to work on to make sure that you don't have water setting up against either building, whether it be 405 or whether it be 409. Yeah.
James, let's assume this is an open space
Yeah.
and we have snowfall, and then you have snow melt, and it goes towards the alley. That alley is just a sheet of ice, when we have quite a bit of snow melt.
Right.
Is that going to compound the problem, or is this going to be diverted into a,
Well,
Kind of a drainage
you're,
area.
you're exchanging non-pervious area with non-pervious area, meaning that if you have a rooftop there, it depends on which the drainage of the rooftop where it went. Well, we all know from the photos what happened. It set right there and collapsed the roof. But with proper gutters and everything, that's where the water should have went anyways, probably back towards the alley. Okay, so if you pave it, you're going to have the same condition. It's basically a rooftop laying on the ground that would drain back towards the alley. So
makes sense?
it's probably going to compound it more than what it was the last however many years. But if it was done correctly, begin with, and had drainage or curb and gutter or gutters, it would have went back to the alley anyway. So you're not going to increase more than what originally was there.
Mr. Morgan?
So, talk us through, what's kind of a timeline here? Because I also know there's some concerns about trying to get this done as quickly as possible.
The timeline at this point is the next thing we will do is we will go out for bids. I would anticipate that we'll probably have that request out here within the next, hopefully yet this week, if not early next week, to have that request out. Give the contractors, probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks to respond back to us. Because part of that's also going to include several alternatives. There's a question about the facade, what to do with that. Do you pave the whole thing? Do you pave just a couple feet in? We'll probably have a couple alternatives for the receive those bids. Once we get those bids back, we bring them back to you and say, what direction do you want to go?
Tobias, do you anticipate the company that's doing the demolition work would be the same one that would do the reconstruction work, the paving and that type of thing? Or are those two separate? Because I got to think that the company that you're looking at, that you're going to have to take bids from to do the demolition, is that pool is going to be pretty small.
Right. I would anticipate it's probably in one contract. Now, they may sublet that back out
Okay.
to somebody else, but I would anticipate you're going to have one contract with one general contractor on site, so they control it from start to finish.
Okay.
Mr. Kerr?
Since Toby went ahead and mentioned this facade, is that a freestanding facade? It's not hooked onto either one of the buildings?
That's correct. From the investigations that we did, that the building, it's one of the first buildings actually constructed downtown. It is a freestanding building, and then the other two buildings were later built next to, and they filled in those gaps. So they do have separate walls, and that's what was determined.
Okay, if and there is a push I can see to save the facade, how would you hook that in? To the existing buildings, or you just can't leave it
Actually,
stand.
Michael from Main Street has shown us some pictures that they've done in some
Yeah.
other areas where they've
We've got
braced
that.
across. They've used metal braces, and they braced across that front and then braced it back against the side buildings and things of that nature. As the structural engineer said, there's a way to do everything. It's just however much money you want to put into this project is what it ultimately comes down to.
And I see-
Now, I will say this, both property owners on each side of this property was really gracious. They allowed us to get into their buildings to look at these walls, which really helped our investigation. So that really helped out a bunch, because this could have been a really daunting task if we wouldn't have access to see how these walls were connected. So they were really helpful in that regard.
But I did read in here that the engineer said that could be accomplished with great expense, but in his opinion, it would not be a worthy effort. So,
It comes down to the tie that the city of Beatrice wants to have with his historic background. I think how much money the city of Beatrice wants to spend for that.
Mr. Morgan?
So kind of going back to the RFP or the quote, does this engineering company kind of help you guys write that, or you guys can write that yourselves? I'm just thinking of all the complexities that might pop up with this type of removal.
We'll work with the city of Lincoln. They've obviously had some that were similar to this. We'll work with some other local communities that have had properties that are similar to this one. We won't go back and recreate the wheel. We'll start with some help from some of those communities, as well as we'll probably get a hold of this gentleman to have us just make sure that we're checking all the boxes we need to check before we go out for bids.
And then hopefully they might even have a, shall we say, a list to send
Right.
the bids out to.
Rich?
I know this is a ridiculous question, but apparently this has been dropped in our lap. Is there any insurance or anything that we can, and Butch is shaking his head. I'm just trying to figure out a way to alleviate our cost on the thing, but, and you're gonna check into that other thing for me, correct? So,
Anybody else from the council? What about from the audience? Michael? Come on up and just give me your name, Michael, if you would, and who you're with.
Yes, I'm Michael with Main Street Beatrice, and obviously have some different interest in downtown with Main Street Beatrice and the downtown organization that we are. As James and Mr. Little said, yeah, there's definitely some major issues here at 407, which I don't think anyone would at all disagree with. Our only hope is that, yes, maybe there is some positive outcome that can definitely come out of this. There's certainly several positive outcomes that can result from this. And while it may not necessarily be the full preservation of the facade, that'd be wonderful. Obviously, costs do come into effect. There's definitely some other options that I think we could pursue that would keep this from being that vacant lot with that grass, or just that 100% paved lot that's, whether it be a parking lot or something like that, that's not what we want. The parking lot is not the option that is going to help business grow, that's going to create additional tax revenues, well, be it property tax or sales tax, or draw new people into this community. It's a 25-foot wide space. And yes, we may need to pave it to help preserve those two buildings, but I think there's much better uses of that property that can come out of this to just better serve Beatrice. And that's the big thing. I know I gave you guys a little packet with just some different pictures from other communities, different things that they've done. Obviously, like you said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. This has happened quite often. Almost every downtown at some point in its life has either a fire or a roof collapse. So this is by no means at all unique to us. And so here's just a few different options that you guys see. A lot of them end up being a kind of a public gathering space or an outdoor dining facility, an event area. Again, one of the things we're going to be limited with is this is a 25-foot wide space. So obviously it can't be anything real grandiose, but there definitely are options, and I hope that the neighboring property owners will definitely speak to some of the different thoughts that they have had. We've talked about different things. How do you keep that historic integrity? Because we are in the process of trying to get a National Register Historic District for the downtown. They are looking at that being a reality within the year or in about a year. If that does end up coming to fruition, one of the nice things is we will have state and federal tax credits to help other property owners fix up their buildings and help with different repairs and whatnot if they decide to seek those. And while this 407 property, keeping the facade may not be the linchpin in being able to get that historic district done, something like a parking lot would be detrimental to that. One of the things that we've run into in the past is you guys already have too many parking lots. You guys already have too much of that. And so, yes, if you are able to create something different, while it still does not help you get that historic district, it doesn't hurt you getting that historic district, unlike what a parking lot may. And so that's just one of the things. Again, returning this property to the tax register, if you look in that, you'll see just some of the things. If this is some of these little figures on that last page there, just show what the value of, again, an actual productive building downtown is. Now, again, this right here probably will not end up having the building reconstructed here on this site, but just talks about some of the cost to a community of not having that back on the tax rolls, whether that be through jobs or the property tax, sales tax, just the general sales that a business could generate off of that site, whatever it may be. That's what we just hope that we can slow down just enough. Obviously, public safety and the preservation of the two neighboring businesses and the Black Crow as a business itself, or I should say the two properties and Black Crow as a business, are the most important aspect. We don't want to endanger any of that. But once we get that handled, I just hope that we can slow down enough to pick what is truly right for Beatrice. I know it may not be the cheapest option, but I hope that we pick what's going to end up making the biggest impact in the future. and not a burden to this community.
Mr. Kerr?
Mike, I noticed on some of your pictures that you've showed us, and you've showed these to me before, if we can't save the facade, if it's just feasibly not possible, you're telling me that if we come in and do something like this, like you're showing, like this first picture up top that you give us, or something as such, that would not endanger our historical.
If we keep the facade, this building was recently reevaluated, and it is now a contributing property to the historic district.
Right.
If we end up getting rid of the facade, it's no longer contributing to the historic district, okay? We do lose that. So yes, it is a minor blow, or I should say, not just a minor blow, it's a moderate blow to those efforts, but it's not the linchpin. If you do some different things like this, if you eliminate that gaping hole, just that vacant spot, whether that be, some bricks, using the bricks from this building and creating a kind of a wall with a nice wrought iron gate and this and that, and then you were able to tell a little bit of that story of that building, while it does not necessarily help you with the historic district, it keeps you from having just that wide open vacant space that detracts and ends up counting against you. That's what we don't want, is something that counts against us in those efforts. And we just don't, for the aesthetic appeal of the downtown, from 3rd Street all the way down to 7th, you've got only one small gap. One. Well, now all of a sudden you start adding more of these, and the appearance really starts to go down.
So if we take the existing brick from the facade or something, and build a half wall.
Yep,
Or
who knows,
something
maybe
such.
if you can't save the full facade, maybe it's possible that you knock off the top half of the facade and you keep the lower half, those 2 large windows and the doorway. I mean, there's all sorts of different options, but we just hope that you guys will take those into consideration and go out and get bids on those and see if that's a feasible option for this property. That way, it can be put back into a productive use for the neighboring businesses or just for the downtown as a whole.
Well, nobody wants to see it in a parking lot, that's for sure.
One of the neighbors has joined us, David Lang, and I'm going to ask that you guys share the microphone if you would, please, because that's one of the biggest complaints I get is the TV audience can't hear you.
David Lang, I'm the owner of 409 Court Street. Kind of slipped in here. Michael emphasized a lot of the points that I wanted to make sure were made. If we can't save the facade, it'd be awesome if we could, but we recognize that costs and public safety and that kind of thing are our paramount considerations. And what we'll do is, we'll be positive throughout the whole thing, because let's face it, that's the only way to react with this. Let's see, and we can make lemonade out of these lemons. So we can use elements of the building, salvage whatever we can, and incorporate it in what we do with the space. I think we all know with downtown Beatrice, we're not looking at making a buildable lot again because there isn't a demand to build new construction there. So we're looking at what we can do just aesthetically appealing and a productive space. So.
And one of the reasons why this property does have historical significance, I know in the report, he says, well, it doesn't really have a whole lot of bearing on the historical significance. Talking with the State Historical Society, they just recently reevaluated the structure, learning some more about the building. This was back in May or so that they reevaluated this. As far as they understand, this is the first brick building built in downtown Beatrice. Even though it may not look like the prettiest building, well, one's because it's one of the oldest. Why, it's also had some different remodels over the years. It's gone through some different things, but knowing some of those different stories, and since that brick wall is still entirely intact, that's why it changed that. And just knowing the stories behind it keep that historic importance alive with the property, which maybe we can continue on even with salvage materials.
If we lose the facade, we can still give that recognition. And right now with the facade how it is, we don't have that recognition because people just drive by it. So regardless, we'll make something positive out of it. But as long as we have the historic integrity of the downtown and preservation as one of our considerations, we might not be able to save anything, but at least we're doing our best to make sure that we're checking all the blocks.
When we put this out for bids, is there the possibility that consideration would be given to input from Michael Sothen and Dave Lang and anybody else that would be interested?
mean, that decision ultimately will be this body here.
I understand.
Right.
But I just wonder if that wouldn't be an idea that, just throwing it out there, saying that there is a strong possibility that there is a preservation group that wants to try to maintain some functionality of this space, and at the same time make it historically viable.
Main Street Beatrice has a design committee, which its mission is the aesthetic principles of the downtown and also the historic preservation aspects. And we would sure love to get David and Kate involved with that, if that's something you guys would include us.
Yeah, well, it's just something I just thought of, and it might be a consideration. Obviously, it's going to be the council. Mr. Party?
First consideration should be safety, of course. You gotta, and we can't wait too long on this. We can't wait 3 months, maybe, who knows, 6 months for sure. Another thing is, do we have a minimum guess on what it would take at very least to clear this up? Just to get it without any other bells and stuff? And where's this money coming from?
We have not been given any estimates, if you will, as to the cost.
Not even a clear off the ballpark figure? $500,000?
I think you're probably at six figures, is my guess.
Money's coming from where?
This money will come from either our contingency line in our budget, or it will come from cash reserves.
Mr. Fairbanks?
Can I ask Lorene? So, Lorene, are you here to answer questions, or are you just here as a spectator?
Well, if you're going to ask her a question, I'd like her to come
Yeah,
up.
I would
and-
too. That's why I'm
Yeah.
asking her if she's
I can
willing.
answer questions if I know something you want to know.
Stan.
Mr. Kerr?
Also, I have asked a budget to check in to see if any way possible that we could use the LB 840 funds for part of this cleanup. And there is a possibility that could be used also to offset the cost of this thing.
Those LB 840 funds may be best used to help defray the costs that are going to be associated with the neighboring properties.
Well,
Try to keep those from becoming burdens for them.
well, that's what I'm saying. We're looking at the LB 840 funds also to see if we can, because we definitely don't want your two guys' buildings suffering over this.
So Lorene, my question to you, you need to,
Yes, I need to say who I am. I'm Lorraine Riddle, and for purposes of this meeting, I'm the chair of that design committee for Main Street.
right, and I understand, from what I understand over the years, you're the driving force of getting the designation of historical district in the downtown area.
That's true. I started working on that in the late 1980s.
Yeah, I know it's been ongoing. So my question to you, and I pose it after Mayor Worth made his recommendation, or made his, posed his question that, there'd be some input. So my question to you is, knowing our situation that we have, in a perfect world, going forward from where we're at, what would your group like to see done with the front of the building or the space that we have?
I think everyone's expressed, we're all on the same page, and that is, if you can save as much as you can to show that there was the building and actually the simplicity of design, the fact those lower windows were a jewelry store where people could look in and see all of that. It's a relatively simple design. It'd be lovely if the full facade could be saved, but even if the first floor could be saved with something that indicated the shape that was above it, or something that just showed the age of those bricks. We realized, in a perfect world, this never would have happened. The next best thing is, it'd just be a simple little re-roof job. I mean, there's a lot of things we wish could have happened. But now that we're here, again, the idea that Michael has mentioned this before. One of the problems that we had is that they deal with concentration of buildings in a certain amount of space. And we have wonderful buildings downtown that are fully eligible for the National Register and for this district, but they're spread across too large a space because of all of that helpful parking that's been put in around the downtown. And so starting to have that parking infringe on this kind of solid wall we've had of appropriate buildings, it's kind of like the start of something you don't want to see. So that, because we already were in trouble, that's why the last time we attempted to do this, we literally started having to wait for buildings to age into the process because we didn't have enough that were 50 years older that were contributing, that were in a small enough space. So we've literally been waiting for some of these facades to age to be 50 so that we could start the process. We could build on the process we have. And in fact, I'm the reason I appealed 11 buildings downtown the last time when they came back and told us what they had. I thought they were wrong about 11 of them, and you can see I was right about at least one of those 11, but because they didn't know the history. They didn't realize that a number of the buildings that had been initially chosen clear back in 1976, even before my time here, had fallen out of their list. And again, some of them were innocent. They thought that windows had been taken away. Those of us local knew they had just been covered over, that the original integrity of the building was still there underneath. So that's the process that has been going on, not thinking at all that we would be in this basically sort of crisis situation. Okay. But that building, one next door, where the Black Crow is, was another we had appealed. The problem was in 1976, those stuccoed facades were not regarded as authentic and original, so they weren't considered at all. Now, this many years later, when we're looking at them, those now are over 50 years old, and they show another period. The other thing that happened originally is Beatrice was only regarded as having a significant period in the downtown in the original construction of that downtown. And some of us were making a point that that's not true, that post-World War II, there was another great resurgence of activity and development in that downtown, and they needed to look at those rather than ruining that facade, but rather as people who had the resources to update and again, really make that downtown productive. So the second part of our appeal was to consider two areas of historic significance. And the one has just recently become, again, old enough to really be regarded as historic.
Okay.
Rich?
Something you said, Lorraine, the stucco. Now, if we could save a portion, or which I'm in favor of, would you want the stucco taken down and taking it down to brick? And
we want what will survive and be the best, in terms of something practical. We have it both ways. We know we have an old historic brick, yes, but we also now have stucco that is old enough that it is
and
itself.
The stucco does that. Okay,
it's historic also. So we can have our cake and eat it too. In this case,
well, that's good.
With this building, you may not have to try to save the stucco. I mean, if you got rid of the stucco, that wouldn't be a problem. I know the gentleman with the State Historical Society said you can already notice it's already coming off. The stucco,
yes.
The stucco did not bond real well with the brick, which he says is actually a good thing because it keeps moisture from being trapped behind there and destroying the brick. He said, so yeah, if it could, he says even if you were able to save the facade, he said, take off all that stucco and get it back to that original brick would not be a problem.
There's a lot of crackling on that, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
In the yeah.
Kate?
And we know that brick is local. They weren't carrying brick in here from a long ways. So the brick itself has historic connections.
Kate?
My name is Kate Radigan, and I own the property at 405 Court Street, which is where the Black Crow restaurant is located. I wanted to come tonight because I was interested in how this conversation was going to progress and how the decision-making was going to progress. And I have a few thoughts about this whole thing. I'm not a historian. I'm more of a capitalist. So when I look at this, I kind of think, okay, what could happen here that would be positive for Beatrice? I don't think of it so much as being a gap, but maybe being an opportunity to have some green space or an outside dining space, because our restaurant does have a door that goes right from our dining room. It's actually a window, but the sill is only about a foot off the ground. Could easily be made into a doorway to that space. And over the years, we've been here 22 years. This June, we've often thought about, just fantasized, wouldn't it be cool to have that? But there was a building there, so we couldn't really do anything about that. But I don't think it would have to be something ugly. I am concerned that I agree with Ted, from what my knowledge is about water, that just paving on the sides might be a little problem because the water is going to go this way, and that center area under the building, which has not been covered all those years, I would be concerned about that not being compacted enough that you would get damage from the water pressure going underneath that. So I would be most comfortable with that being sealed there so that the water can't get in, affect our foundation, which is in really good shape in our building.
And every one of these examples
They're fully,
holds that to be true. I mean, if you look at every one of these pictures, they make a visually aesthetic place, but they still have that concrete to help
right.
save those.
And there are
buildings.
things you can do with the concrete to make it look more attractive. It can be stained, it can be, landscaped. You can have, I think an interesting idea would be if you can't save the facade, if you can save part of the facade, a corner of it, a photograph, a plaque of what the building used to look like, what the significance of it was for a brick building, or use some of the bricks and the material to make, part of the gate on the front of it. I am pushing right now, big time, doing a lot of landscaping and planting in downtown. I try to do that in my business. All in pots, obviously, since I'm on the street there. But I think if we would utilize some, planters and try to make that look older instead of more modern, that it could be a very appealing way for people that are driving through the downtown and make them want to stop and linger. I mean, everybody likes to go sit outside, and it's well suited for that type of space because it's shaded from the sun, it's sheltered from the wind, largely from the prevailing super winds that blow down our Court Street. So it has a lot of advantages for that kind of space, and I don't think it needs to be something that would be ugly. Unfortunately, if the building can't be saved, and it doesn't look like it can, I think it could be something that would be a real positive addition to the downtown.
And the bids basically are going to be total demolition or possible saving part of it, is that correct?
Yes, I mean, the base bid will be for total demolition, and alternates will be to save all the facade, part of the facade, give us some different ideas of what else can be done there.
A lot of considerations here. Number one, I agree with Dwight that safety obviously is number one. The last thing we want is that building to collapse in the street. And on your Mother's Day tour, Lorraine, that wouldn't work very well, would it?
Or the alley tour, that's another one you've got to take into consideration.
I did want to clarify one more thing, Stan. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when you were talking about whether the building's facade was connected to our building, and I think there's just a little confusion there because while the main structure of the building was separated by a stairway from our building, the facade is connected to our building. It is definitely attached to our building, and you can see the facade where they bridged across that gap between the stairway and that building, and that is connected to the main building, and it is putting stress on our building and cracking the front of our building. You can see that.
Okay.
Evidence of that. So
You can see they were likely stuccoed at the same time,
Yeah.
so.
while there's not a common wall there is an attachment of that facade to the front of our building.
Well, obviously, this is going to be a determination made by those folks that are going to take a look at this, and that's why we're going to put it out for bids, see if we can't resolve this issue.
And basically, our hands are tied by what it's gonna cost. We have to be good stewards of money also.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. The next item is a request for qualification for renewable generation of energy.
The idea here is just to let you guys know, we are looking at going out for an RFQ for some type of renewable utilities or electricity source here in Beatrice. Our current agreement with MPPD allows us to do this. The contract we're currently negotiating with them would allow us to do this. In order for it to qualify, though, it has to be some type of renewable generation, so some type of either wind, solar, something along those lines. And what we are looking at is somebody who would come in, they would own the facility, they would operate the facility, they would maintain the facility. We would simply have an agreement to purchase all of the power it generates here in Beatrice. It's called a purchase power agreement, and it would have a set price in it for, say, 20 years of what you're buying the electricity from them at that set price. A couple of upsides is, one, you're hoping that they generate power cheaper than what you're purchasing today from MPPD. The second thing is any power you buy from them, you're not buying from MPPD, which then lowers your demand, which lowers your overall bills. And so that's what we're looking at. You're probably looking at somewhere 2 to 4 megawatts, which is, maybe one wind turbine, maybe two, to kind of give you an idea of how big the facility might be. So
Lincoln does that, don't they? They got a couple of wind turbines up north of Lincoln, don't they?
Lincoln's got a couple out there along the interstates. Central Cities recently, they've started putting in a solar farm. So there have been some other communities that have done this. So we're going to go out and see what's available. And maybe we'll come back with nothing. Maybe we'll come back with some proposals that make sense, and we'll look to pursue those.
Comments, anybody? Okay. Next is a report on a proposal to take advantage of an option to purchase the 2012 Elgin street sweeper at the end of the 3-year lease. That lease expired in December 2014. The lease buyout is $90,000, and looking at some financing options.
Right. The opportunity came up, as you recall, back in 2011. We leased a street sweeper for the street department. That lease was put on a 3-year term. We've expended the end of that term, and the buyout was $90,000. It was not budgeted for, so we looked to return the street sweeper at that point. And when we did so, the company approached Jason and said, they'd be willing to finance the remaining $90,000. Jason and I then did some discussion, did some research, found that $90,000 for the street sweeper appears to be a good price based upon comparable sales that Jason has found out there in the marketplace. We started looking at other financing options, and you'll see that we contacted all the local banks. Some were not interested in providing a quote, others were, and so you can see that what those financing options we were given. The largest difference is just when the first payment becomes due. Jason believes he can find in his budget money to pay for the sweeper this year if necessary, or we could push the first payment of the sweeper into next budget year and then just budget around it going forward. Jason can tell you as to why he needs the second street sweeper, and so I'll let him cover that part.
Mr. Moore?
I guess what I'm looking at is I feel it's extremely important for us to have a second sweeper, not only in case one breaks down, that we have another one to fall back on, but also for the amount of time that it takes for us to make around the town. Right now, with 2 sweepers, I can get around town about 2 weeks. I can make it around town with 2 sweepers going. If we fall back on just the 2008 that we have, the 2008 is a little slower. It doesn't travel. The travel speed of it is not quite as fast. Ultimately, what takes us the most amount of time is for us when we take the street sweeper and we'll go out and we'll pick up. We fill a hopper, fills up our box, if you will. And what ends up happening is we may be in the northeast corner of town. And when our hopper gets full, we'll have to pick up and we'll have to run back down to Center Street. I don't like the idea of necessarily making another dump location at another area in town. Nobody wants to see a pile of debris, a pile of sand, leaves, sticks. We don't necessarily want to see one of those at Hannibal Park or down along Riverside somewhere, somewhere where we own a bigger amount of area. That's what causes us the most amount of time is once we fill up the sweeper to be able to kick it into travel mode, run back down to Center Street and dump our material. Now, when we go through the day, if we can have both sweepers going, again, we can make it around town in 2 weeks. If not, if it's just one, it takes us about 5. It takes us a strong 5 weeks to get around town. And that's just because of the fact that the sweeper's a little slower. It doesn't, it still sweeps decent. It doesn't sweep near as nice as the 2012 does. Again, the 2008 that we have has got 4,700 hours on it. So if you look at the machine and compare it, it's got 42,000 miles on it on the 2008. If you look at the machine and you compare it to prices around of other machines that have sold, our 2008 is still a bargain. With the amount of hours and miles that it has on it, it is still a very how you might want to say, people would still be very interested in it. It's still a very good machine for us to keep. I just think that with us being able to go out, we want to be able to keep the gutters clean. We want to be able to keep the street clean as possible. Nobody wants to see debris all over the place and pop cans in the gutters like you have. And the last thing we want is with our storm sewers. We have a lot of intersections through town that will flood. Some of that reason is because the storm sewers are undersized to hold the amount of water that they need to travel and carry away. The other reason is you'll have debris that'll get down in these storm sewers and block them. We've seen storm sewers that we've had to run the camera down because we're getting blockages, and they're getting blocked with sticks and leaves and debris that go down into a storm sewer may have a 90-degree bend in it, and the debris, the sticks get in there and they ball up, and then the leaves come in, and then we end up getting in an intersection that floods. If we were to have both sweepers, it gives us the possibility to be able to go around town faster, keep the town cleaner, keep a lot of the debris out of our catch basins. If we go back to having one sweeper, we're going to have more troubles, and that's just very easily. I mean, I can't say it any easier and any nicer. We're going to have more troubles. We're going to have more flooding. We're going to have more storm sewers that we're going to have to go vac to try and get the sticks and debris out of them, and it's just not going to make the town look nice. And really, I mean, that's what we all want.
Questions?
I like
Artie?
having it, but what are we going to miss out on by taking this out of something that's not budgeted for?
There's a few places. I'm not going to say how money was spent in the past, but I can say how it's spent now. And I think that I'm a lot tighter with the money that we have for the street department. I think that my money stretches a little bit further. I think there's accounts that I'm going to have leftover money from. I think that, I think that just being smart with the way that we spend our money, I know right off the top of my head, if I had to throw it out there, I know I've got a gravel account that we have got tons of street gravel already on hand that will go towards gravel streets. There's $30,000 right there. That would make my first year's payment. If I just had to throw it out there right off and give you a softball, I would say that would be where it would come from.
But you're not canceling any projects
No,
scheduled already?
no, it's just spending my money wiser.
Let's be careful with that gravel. You don't use my sweet sweeper on my street, so let's be careful with the gravel.
Well, and come spring, we'll come back around your street, and the ditches will go from looking like this.
Yeah, you were talking
to
about
looking
that.
nice, rounded ditches. And those ditches on all of our gravel streets have filled in with gravel. We'll come through in the spring, and we're going to round the ditches out. And the ditches right now on all of our gravel streets are filled in with gravel. Tons of excess gravel that will either get taken out of the ditches and hauled down to Center Street and put into our pile, or most of it will get put back onto our gravel streets again, and we'll have a ridge of gravel along our streets. So we have more gravel than I could ever use in 5 years.
Well, yeah, what was that, 5-6 years ago, they went in and did those ditches and
And I have nothing but complaints. People call and complain because they can't mow their ditches.
Right.
And we knew it wasn't a good idea then. People complained about the way they looked, and water would set in them, and you would get ragweed that would grow in the Glenover area and some of the areas on the west side. Just simple making the ditches rounder will increase drainage. It will allow property owners to mow their ditches and not have problems, and it'll also get all that gravel out of our ditch.
Okay, Ted?
Jason, you talked about, have you looked at the different route for the sweepers? I mean, you talked about where you're dumping it. I mean, you're running essentially the same areas in the same time, but have you looked to reduce your mileage to and from? I mean, have you looked at the...
I'm not for sure where we want to put a dump pile that is going to look good.
I get that. My question is that, and I'm not saying necessarily start, but I'm remaining in the dump pile down, but working for a company that has industrial engineers that plan out your routes, I'm just saying, can you shorten your route so you have less travel time?
Really, if I have to sweep 26th Street, I still have to go back to Center Street to dump.
Right.
And no matter what, I'm still going to be closer to dump if I'm on the west side or if I'm in Belvedere or the Country Club area. But if I'm on 25th, 26th, anything up around Dorsey, I still have to pick up and go all the way back. No matter what I do, even if I sweep that area first, I still have the same amount of time, whether I start and I run clockwise or counterclockwise, I still have to go the farthest corner.
That was my question.
Rich?
How many blocks can you get with that thing before your hoppers?
It all depends. That in the fall, when the leaves are falling, you might go three blocks. You might go 9 square blocks, maybe. Depends on how heavy the leaves are falling. When we had the storm in June, and we had a lot of sticks and twigs and leaves that had all blown in the streets, that was fairly close to what we would have in the fall, when you'll have a sweeper go down a street, and 2 hours later, nobody can tell that we've been down it. And people will call in and they'll say, "How come you're not sweeping my streets?" And I can tell them, we've been out, and 2 hours later, a good wind blows it all out, or somebody decides they want to blow leaves out of their yard and they blow it out into the street. One or the other, it happens.
That was another question I was going to ask. A few years ago, we had a problem. Are you having much problem with people shooting their grass out into the street? Is that, we got on that here a few years ago, but is that becoming a problem again or anything?
I can't say that I see it. You know that it happens.
Yeah.
Whether or not that is something that you're going to have to be able to see the person probably actually doing it, and rely on a neighbor that's going to call it in, or actually have law enforcement that drives by and sees it happening, because that would be hard to enforce. Somebody saying that the wind blew it out of my yard. You're always going to have people that run and their mowers and have the discharge chute blowing into the street. Is it right? No. But does it happen? We've all seen it.
Well, I know it was a real problem here a few years ago.
Bob?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is, I guess I'd like to see maybe you find the money instead of pushing the payment off to 2016. Isn't that what you said for the options, either working around?
Yes, that's, when you look at the options that are out there, the reason why Key Government Finance was lower is because they wanted payment immediately upon signing. I'm sure that when I talked to the other financial institutions, we talked about moving the payment to next year. I don't think they would have a problem having a payment received right away. I can't speak for them, but I'm assuming they'd be willing to move those up.
Be the next budget year, so December 1st is what some of these payments are calculated on.
Right.
Okay.
And if you look at some of the other sweepers around, there was a 2000 sweeper that had 37,000 miles on it. Comparing that to the one that we have that has 1,800 and it has 18,000 miles. The 2007 that sold had 37, so it doubled the miles. It was for sale for $100,000. Now, and I understand something that's for sale and something that actually sells is two different things. But there are also models that we've seen that actually sold on auction that were 55 to 60,000 for 2005 models that had 5 times the miles and 5 times the hours. So the sweeper that we have, when I talked to Nebraska Environmental and I tried to get them to come down on their $90,000 price, their reasoning back to me was, listen, if you let it come back to us, we're going to put it at $125,000 and negotiate down with somebody from there. So, and looking at the prices of brooms in the area, I really think that a $90,000 for this broom is a steal.
And I agree with you, and I agree with your thought process on keeping the community clean, and I have been really high on some of your abilities to be conservative, so if you could find it in this year's budget, that'd be great.
I think we can do it.
Okay. Other comments?
Then what we would need, your mayor, is a motion, basically as it's written out in your worksheet, but to pick one of the financial institutions you'd like us to then go work with. you'll see that Key Government Finance, a 3-year term with payments just under $31,000 at 2.98. Again, their first payment would be due upon signing the lease. And then the other two that were in that same ballpark were Pinnacle Bank with a 3-year term, $31,437 payment at 2.5%. U.S. Bank, 3-year term. Their payments were about 66 cents less than Pinnacle's, and they were 2.35. So just let us know which one you'd like us to go work with, and we'll move this project forward.
Rich, you have a question?
Just
It's on my list.
do the one you best think that we get the best deal from. Go from there.
I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we take advantage of the option to purchase the 2012 Elgin Eagle F Street Sweeper at the end of the lease for $90,000 and to finance said purchase through Pinnacle Bank for a year was that 3-year term at, what was that percentage?
It's 2.5.
2.5 interest rate, annual payments beginning fiscal.
December 1st.
Okay,
That's what.
September 1st?
December 1st.
December 1st, in the amount of
$31,437.
$31,437.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Kerr. Discussion.
Looks to me, if we look officially just at the numbers, US Bank beats them by a very little amount, but it's still the lowest figure on there. I'm thinking maybe we should make a motion to modify it to read US Bank at the other interest rate. I mean, it ain't much at all, but 2.35 beats out 2.50.
I'm staying out of this.
My question is, if these don't come in these weren't put out as bid, we don't have to take that. I would lean in and agree with Dwight. It's, would you say 66? I'm doing the math. It's just 66 cents?
Correct. It's $1.80 over the life of the.
That's what I figured.
Have we, I guess so. This brings up my question. I know that, and I know the mayor needs to stay out of it, but I know that we have dealt with Pinnacle regularly. Is U.S. Bank someone that you deal with regularly as well?
No, I simply called all the financial institutions in town. They were one who was willing to submit a bid. I did verify that there weren't any fees. We were comparing apples to apples the best we could. Those were the numbers I was given.
Well, like I said, in my personal life, I try to go with the ones that I deal with. But if you're required to, I have to kind of lean in with Dwight. It's 66 cents, but it's 66 cents.
Are there any laws or things that guide us by taking lowest bid, or only different?
We're not required, because this item is not being assessed against the property, we're not required to bid it out. So,
Over 66 cents.
It really don't matter to me, but I think if you're gonna go by low numbers, unless you send out another memo that says who will give us 2.30, let them fight for us. Isn't there a commercial like that? I mean, by rights, we should be going with the lowest number on here, if all things else are equal.
Is everything else is equal, right?
Everything else is equal. I've asked both institutions. They appear to be all the same.
Please, Councilman Party, can I just retract that and go with U.S. Bank?
You just make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we take advantage of the option to purchase the 2012 Elgin Eagle F Street Sweeper at the end of the lease for $90,000 and to finance said purchase through U.S. West Bank. And everything else is the same.
U.S. Bank.
Yes, Bank.
And is that agreeable with the second?
Yeah, whatever.
All right.
The next
Any
Ted, Toby,
further
next
dis-
time you go to the banks, take Hendricks with you so he can auction off this
I
thing.
vote no on this.
And we'll get it.
I vote no now.
Any further discussion? Anybody from the audience have a comment? Your vote, please. And that is approved 6-0.
Jason, you get your sweeper.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Good. All right, next item is the city administrator's monthly report.
Yeah, we just want to highlight a few things. Obviously, we'll ask any questions that you guys may have. One was the Second Street project. Some of you may be wondering where that's at in the process. Department of Roads has retained the engineering firm of Snyder and Associates. They will do the final design for that street. Again, this is Second Street from Court Street to Ellis Street. Part of that will include the intersection there, some handicap ramps, but the biggest issue we have to work with is the drainage of the water. There are no inlets in there, and how exactly to make that work. You are probably looking at a spring or summer of 2016 construction date.
So you're gonna take that dip out?
That is the plan, to take the dip out in the intersection.
Make it a fast street.
That's right. So that's where we're at on the Second Street project. You'll note on their public properties that we'll be in the city auditorium hopefully this week. You'll recall we got a grant through Keep Yasha Beautiful, was able to acquire a grant to pay for most of the paint so they can come in and put a fresh coat of paint on the city auditorium. So you'll see that work beginning here shortly. WPC department, we met with Olson Associates and we started the first step in the list of capital improvement plans or projects they had laid out for us, and that is to work on the sewage pumps that are down there. The first pumps that come into the station are currently oversized. No matter how much we turn them down, they're still too big, and so we're looking at installing some smaller, more efficient pumps for us, which should help the plant run more efficiently. So we have started that one. You'll probably see an agreement with Olson Associates coming back to this body in 2 weeks for approval for that project. City council meetings are currently available on YouTube. So tomorrow sometime, Chris Lindell will probably come down. He'll pull a copy of our city council meeting. He'll put it on YouTube. So if you go to our website, and in case you missed something and want to watch it again or see how you did last night, you can go on our website. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a little emblem for YouTube, and you can get on there and watch the city council meetings.
YouTube's on the computer, right?
That's correct.
No, it could be on your phone.
Or your phone.
Hey,
Or your phone.
I have Windows 8 now, so.
The welcome signs, we've had an issue come up with the welcome signs, and that has to do with the wording on them. In order to receive permission to use the national park emblem, we have to have a greater tie to the national park itself. We couldn't simply say home of the first homestead or something along those lines. We actually had to reference the Homestead National Monument. So Carol Schuster put together some wording. I forwarded those on to Mark Engler, and he is getting the okay that wording would be sufficient. So
Giving us how much money for this?
we're working on that one yet.
There is something in the works, right?
I believe Michael has a webinar lined up for Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? I think there's a webinar coming up here shortly to look at some possible grant opportunities that might be available. So
I hear
We won't change the words until they.
the president's going to speak on that tomorrow night in his State of the Union address.
And then finally, I talked to you about the branding project. It's not forgotten. They've completed all the interviews. They came down, they've completed about 38 interviews. We met today, went over the raw data, and they're currently contemplating and putting everything together in a format that they can then come in and present to everybody else. But they did have some themes that came through, and so we're looking forward to continuing with that project. Other than that, I answer any questions anybody might have.
Just, since I know, back in October or wherever it was, we decided to build a landfill. Is there other steps shortly that are coming on that project?
You're going to have a Boswell meeting next Monday at 7 o'clock. So at the same time you're
Right.
work session, we'll meet with the Boswell meeting first. One thing we're going to talk about is some Boswell rates and rate study. The other thing, we need to start laying out that time frame. And we got to decide, if the first step is going to be to write an RFP to go out for engineering services to do the design work. That's going to be the first step.
Questions? Comments? Anybody from the audience? All right, legislative update. The last item.
Again, just to kind of give you an update of what's going on at the legislature, session just recently started, so there's not a whole lot out there yet. The one that you'll note on the sheet in your packet is LB 104, which would basically allow, if you get your utility bill sent to you by email today, that we could send you the disconnect notice by email. That would be the biggest change. Today, the statute still says that although you get your bill by email, I still have to snail mail you a copy of the disconnect notice. And they said, well, let's just match those two up so they...
That'd be on the computer, Rich.
Snail mail. Yeah, that's a new one on me now, too.
The email, that'd be on the computer too, Rich.
Okay.
So it just started. We'll continue to kind of keep you updated of anything that might be pertinent to the city.
Okay. Next meeting, city council next regular city council meeting will be February 2nd, 2015 at 7 in the Beatrice Public Schools Administration Building Meeting Room, this room. There will be a BOSWA meeting followed by a council work session on January 26th, that's next Monday at 7 in these quarters also. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I move that the meeting be adjourned at 8:17 p.m.
Second.
Been moved and seconded by Party that we adjourn the meeting at, what did you say, 8 what?